What was the best you have no power here moment you have ever seen? I taught my 6th grade students about democratic processes, and we ran a simulation. Without fail, every one of my classes tried to impeach me. Should have played monarchy instead. As long as you don't have a guillotine in your class. Did your parents sign the permission slip for the execution? We had an our lady who was extremely power hungry. She is walking around with the president of the company who flew in from Japan. She rushes him though the warehouse. Just spits out, "Oh, these are the warehouse guys, we don't have to stop and talk to them." He stops, walks over and starts talking to me about my last vacation. How buying my house went. You could just see her fuming behind him as we talked for almost 45 minutes. I've had multiple meetings with him, we knew each other really well. I don't think he liked her and drug it out on purpose, but I was thrilled to see her just standing there bored as hell. Sounds like the hour department at the warehouse I used to work at. It always blew my mind because the place was a distribution center. The guys in the warehouse were literally the most important staff in the building, since we were the ones picking the orders and sending them to the trucks, but any time you had to talk to them, they treated you like a nuisance. Duckers always had huge lunches and social gatherings and whatnot for the office people, almost never for us. I didn't feel much sympathy when a huge chunk of everybody in the office got laid off, and not a single order picker lost his job. Edit, goddammit, I've never even seen a full episode of The Office. That shows you who really counts. A coworker friend of mine was flying back from a sales conference in Vegas and he was able to upgrade to a first-class seat. We had this bitch sales VP that was on the same flight. She was the snobby, entitled type with a full-time nanny and giant McMansion in the suburbs, and she generally treated people who worked for her like servants. She sees him in a first-class seat as she is making her way to coach and asks him how he got that seat. He used points to upgrade. As people are getting settled in, she makes her way back up to the first-class cabin and asks to speak with the lead flight attendant. She tells him that one of her underlings is sitting in first class, and that she needs to switch with him since she's higher on the corporate ladder. The guy can't believe what he's hearing, but she won't take no for an answer. Finally he tells her she has to go back to her seat, or she will be escorted from the plane. She made a complete ass of herself in front of the whole first-class cabin. When I was working customer service for a restaurant delivery service, not unlike DoorDash, I had a customer send in a complaint about hair in their food. The hair was sitting on top of the food. I checked their account, and they had one order on their account, which is a red flag. I checked their phone number and find multiple accounts, each other 1 to 2 orders, all of them complaining about hair in the food. I deny a refund because the customer has actually used the same identical photo for the last order since they ordered the same thing. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again, typical stuff that they always say. Eventually the customer gives up and ends the call, then immediately tries again. I get the support request. See who it is, then deny the refund again. She ends the call, then tries again. The person behind me gets the call. I tap the person on the shoulder and show them what I pulled up on my screen, and that person denies the refund. The next day she calls back and tries again and is outside of the refund window, so the customer demands to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor bans her from the service for multiple fraudulent refund requests. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again, so we agree. Great. I've managed service industry for years, and the number of people who make that threat having never spent a penny is baffling, especially this year. I swear it's once a week right now that after I tell somebody to leave and not return, they've threatened not to return. I've had to have police remove people and they'll scream about how they'll never return on their way out. Are the police dragging you out not enough of a sign that that's exactly what I want? What about the criminal trespassing notice you got? Some people just cannot fathom that they're not wanted everywhere by everyone. Some dudes would walk in for the first time and loudly declare, "I'm finally here." Like they just got back from liberating France and it was just a big ol' red flag that declared, "I will demand special treatment the entire time I'm here." I had a rough childhood with a drug addict father. My mom struggled to make ends meet and my first job was paying for the mortgage. After several months of working, again at my first job, I finally had some money to spend on myself and decided to get a computer and a decent internet connection. At the time, the best internet I could buy as part of a dish combo package. I bought a dish and brought it home to install in the house. During this time my dad was still living at home with us, but he was hardly there and my parents had all but separated at that point. My dad promptly asked me what I was doing putting a dish on his house. I let him know that I pay the mortgage now and I make the decisions on what we do with the house. I was young, but it was a very empowering moment for me. Edit, I didn't expect to see all this when I checked Reddit again. I'll try to answer questions and things below. I like the jokes, probably a coping mechanism lol. Guess revenge is a dish best served on the side of the house. One of my new employees came from a competitor who is, shall we say, not as put together as we are. Her former boss had actually called me to yell at me about poaching his consultants. Which, in and of itself, is weird enough. However, a few weeks after she started, the dude rolled up to our office. He had apparently been calling her to get her to finish an analysis for him and she just ghosted him. I went to the lobby to see what the duck he was doing here. He started in on me again and then she happened to walk by. I didn't fully understand the conversation, but at one point he literally demanded she do this analysis. She just said, "Or what?" and waited a few beats before turning on her heels and walking away. I did the old hand on his back point to the door universal symbol for leave, or a large security man will make you leave. Never heard from him again. I've got a similar story. Many years ago, we fired a salesperson. She was a compulsive liar and unethical as hell. She was also living under the delusion that the place would fall apart without her, and that we'd be begging her to come back in a couple of weeks. So it didn't sit too well with her when we hired her replacement. His first day on the job, she calls him up to cuss him out for stealing her job. Later that day, she called corporate. I understand their conversation went like this. That bastard's trying to steal my clients. Hess going around town telling people he replaced me. Corporate, he did replace you. Harass him again or any other employees and we're calling the cops. That finally convinced her that we weren't going to be begging her to come back. Edit, typos. Compulsive liar and unethical? Sounds like a great salesperson. Had an old boss who was a complete and total bastard. He was actually my boss, and wasn't supposed to interact with us unless it was through our boss, but he just loved trying to make everyone under him squirm. The company had forced him to go to training twice because of how he spoke to people. One day, I get a call at home from him and he just starts unloading cursing, name-calling, insulting over some technical issue he just found out about. After a couple of minutes, I just looked at my phone and hung up on him. The next day, I get called into a meeting with his boss, who basically wants to know who the duck I think I am hanging up on this guy. I calmly explain that no one gets to yell at me on my time, in my home, on my phone. You have to wait for me to be on the clock to pay me for that privilege, and I'll gladly take that money if I'm busy being yelled at, I'm not busy with anything else. Seemed to work. Edit, holy hell, the upvotes and awards. Thanks everyone, I'm going to tell everyone who still cracks jokes about that asshole about all the Reddit love. Brother, you are cool as ice. I am taking notes and slow clapping it out. I wasn't that cool back then. This was my first big job running a cooling plant, and I was a nervous wreck, chain smoking through every shift and hating whenever this guy would rattle me. I think I was as surprised as he was when I hung up and stood my ground lol. You weren't cool. You were cooler. In my first apartment, my parents came to visit, and I said duck when I hit my head on the open door of the freezer while standing up from grabbing something from the fridge. My mother said you can't talk like that in my home. And stopped mid-sentence. When an unhappy client threatens to go hire a better lawyer. They don't seem to get that this isn't a threat when they aren't paying me. In my professional experience, it is exceedingly rare to be fired by a client you don't want to fire you. I've worked at a law firm for only a few months, but yeah. Every time a client has fired us, like 3 times, everyone at the office is like, oh thank God. I was working as a consultant for a company. There was a bit of a competition between me and this guy. Company starts to have some financial issues, so I leave and start working for a client of theirs. Shortly after joining, they bring in this guy I was competing with at my old job. He was technically my equal, except now I was employed by the client, and he was just a consultant. He was trying to one-up me during meetings, and my boss told him that decisions are made by the company, not the consultants. It felt good.